Let's get one thing straight. I don't usually make a habit of scaling 10-foot fences like a cat burglar, but seriously, why did this fence have to be so high? As I was hanging there, grunting and struggling to pull myself up, I heard the wail of sirens cutting through the night. Great, I thought, panic rising in my chest. That definitely wasn't a welcome wagon. I knew I had to get the hell out of there, but just my luck me clothes got snagged on the spike. I was stuck like a fly in a web. Before I could even figure out a way down, a security team blinded me with a high-powered flashlight and screamed at me not to move. Not that I could go anywhere anyway. I let out a frustrated sigh. They weren't exactly gentle, as they dragged me down and hauled me into the living room. Next thing I knew, I was shoved into a fancy chair and surrounded by guards grilling me. But they didn't get a word out of me. I just stared at the floor, jaws clenched, refusing to speak. I've learned early on that silence is sometimes your best weapon. Let me take a second to introduce myself before this gets crazier. The name's Irene, I'm 17. I didn't grow up with silver spoons or fancy fences. My life has been a constant hustle just to keep my head above water. I'm from the part of town where you work twice as hard to get half as far. I've always had to be the strong one, the smart one, the one who fixes things. A few minutes later, the double doors swung open and the owners of the house walked in. Mr. and Mrs. Langston. You could practically smell the wealth on them before they even spoke. It smelled like expensive cologne and judgment. They were radiating that old money aura that makes you feel small. But I didn't shrink back. These were the people I was desperate to find. I figured the silence game had run its course. I owed them an explanation if I wanted to get what I came for. Frankly, I had nothing left to lose, so I looked them dead in the eye. I told them to hold on, explaining calmly that I wasn't some random criminal or a burglar. I admitted I'd seen their job ad for a housemaid and wanted to apply. But their security team had judged me by my age and kicked me to the curb. I hesitated for a split second. I hate looking weak. I hate asking for favors. But then the image of my dad lying in that hospital bed flashed in my mind. That was the only reason I was swallowing my pride. Even though it tasted like acid. I told them the ugly, unvarnished truth. My dad has a rare heart condition. Without expensive treatment soon, he won't make it. I told them flat out that I had no other choice. I didn't just ask. I pleaded with an urgent voice for the job. And I boldly asked for a 6-month salary advance. Yeah, I know, audacious, but desperate times call for insane measures. Right on cue, the door flew open and the silence was shattered. A girl literally fell into the room. She stumbled and barely caught herself on the doorframe. I had no idea who she was, but she was a total mess. She looked to be about my age, wearing a glitzy party dress that was disheveled. She was completely wasted. I mean, super drunk. She peered at the Langstons through blurry eyes and just started laughing like a maniac. Mr. Langston looked at her, and you could see the frustration written all over his face. He was furious, sure, but mostly just deeply disappointed. He addressed her as Carla, so that was her name, and told her that her behavior was completely unacceptable. He asked her if she wasn't ashamed of her appalling results on the Francis Academy entrance exam. He lectured her, insisting that she should be studying hard to redeem herself instead of being out partying at that hour. Carla didn't seem to care one bit. She just rolled her eyes at them and wobbly walked off. I noticed Mr. Langston turning to comfort his wife, who seemed to be in much distress at the girl's inconsiderate behavior. So this was their daughter. They sure seemed to take her education seriously. And based on what her dad just said, she had applied to my school. That gave me an idea. I spoke up, telling them that if they wanted to improve Carla's academic performance, I could help. They both gave me skeptical looks, so I showed them my academic records and explained that I was a valedictorian and had successfully scored a scholarship at Francis Academy. On hearing about my achievements, any apprehensions they had soon faded, and so they came up with a risky plan. They would pay for my dad's hospital fees until he fully recuperated if I took on the identity of Carla and flew to South Korea to study at an international high school there. Meanwhile, Carla would take my place and enroll at Francis Academy just as they wished. I was deep in thought. This deal sounded like the answer to my prayer, but I knew it would be tricky. Pretending to be somebody else in a completely different country was beyond my understanding, so I agreed to do it, but only on 2 conditions. First, I insisted that a guardian must be present to take care of all my paperwork and logistics. Second, I told them that after I completed the deal and returned, they had to help me get into my dream school, the prestigious GBA University. They gave it some thought and then shook my hand in agreement. It looked like we had a deal. The next thing I knew, I was standing on the elite neighborhood in Seoul, South Korea. I found myself just standing there, craning my neck back to gawk at these towering, fancy buildings that seemed to scrape the sky. The glass windows were sparkling in the sun. It was such a stark contrast to the neighborhood I grew up in. I took a deep breath of the crisp air and thought to myself, so this was what it felt like to be born with a silver spoon in your mouth. It was a completely different world, and I was just standing right in the middle of. Mr. Preston, the Langston's lawyer, dropped me off at school for my first day. According to the contract, he was also my legal guardian while I was here. He spent the entire car ride lecturing me. He repeatedly told me not to draw attention to myself. It was just a constant stream of blah 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 in my ear. He seems oh so serious and stiff, but I guess he's okay deep down. He's just doing his job, I suppose. I stepped out of the car and looked up at the school. Honestly, I was overwhelmed. The place looked incredibly modern. The architecture was a work of art all in itself. I wandered around the endless corridor. I tried to navigate the maze to find my class. Surprisingly, everyone seemed quite friendly. The class president, a guy named Minjin, even volunteered to give me a guided tour. As we walked, I looked around in awe. The campus was filled with outstanding paintings, photos, and intricate models made by the student. It wasn't just a school, it looked like a gallery. We passed countless classrooms covering everything from advanced science to fine art. And it just made me gasp. The resources here were unreal. I was busy admiring a piece of artwork when Minjin suddenly stopped. He apologized and told me Lee was looking for him. He promised it would only take a few minutes and asked me to wait for him right there. Then he rushed off. So I lingered around the hall, killing time. That's when I spotted a group of girls nearby. I recognized one of them from my last class. I was pretty sure her name was Isabella. I was about to walk over and be polite, maybe introduce myself, when I realized something was wrong. They had this one girl cornered against the lockers. I realized they were making fun of her hairband. Isabella was sneering at the girl, asking where she had gotten that horrid thing. She speculated loudly that it must have come from a thrift shop, adding a nasty comment about how she heard that was where poor people shop. Then the whole group started laughing. The whole scene disgusted me, my stomach churned. They were ostracizing someone just because she didn't come from a ridiculously rich household like theirs. I let out a heavy sigh. I knew that poor girl's feelings all too well. It hit too close to home. I had to help her, but then Preston's voice echoed in my head. Don't draw attention to yourself. I didn't want to make enemies on day one. I needed a smart way out. I thought, scanning the hallway. Then it hit me. I shouted over to them, acting panicked, and lied that a teacher was coming. I told them they needed to run if they didn't want to get caught bullying. My plan worked a treat. Isabella and her friends nodded at me in panic and rushed off. I walked over to the victim. I reached out and gently touched her arm to show some support, asking if she was okay. But the girl flinched, looking at me with pure terror in her eye. She told me to stay away from her. Then, before I could say another word, she turned and bolted down the hallway. I stood there completely stunned. I was only trying to help. As I turned around, I saw Minjin standing. He must have witnessed the whole drama, but he didn't look annoyed. Instead, he was looking at me with an expression that seemed a bit impressed. He walked over and told me about the ruthless social dynamics of this place. The students here were sharply divided into two groups. He said that 90% were the super rich kids. The remaining 10%, they were the poor kids who got in on scholarship. He went on to say that most students were actually friendly to each other, except for the clique I just encountered. He told me that Isabella is part of that rich kid clique who think their upbringings make them superior to everyone else. She's often mean to the 10% group, simply because she believes they don't deserve to be. And then he dropped the details about the girl I just saved. He told me her name is Susie, she's in that 10% group, and she's the smartest student in our entire year. Hearing that just made me mad. I exclaimed that it was absolute nonsense. I told him that school is school. We're here to study, and I insisted that we should all be treated equally. Minjin looked at me with a genuine smile. He told me I was absolutely right, calling me the new girl with a grin. He admitted that he had a feeling there was something different about me compared to the others right from the start. The very next day, the dynamic shifted. When class was over, Isabella tapped on my shoulder. She smiled and thanked me for the warning about the teacher the day before. Then she asked me to join her group for lunch. I froze. I was scrambling for a polite way to refuse without making an enemy, when luckily, Minjin appeared out of nowhere and asked me to join him instead. Phew, I mentally thanked the universe. I used Minjin as my excuse and quickly fled the scene. However, I glanced back just in time to see Isabella giving me this deeply offended look. Her lips pouted in annoyance. After that, Minjin and I started hanging out constantly. We clicked instantly, and soon we were close friends. We both agreed that the toxic hierarchy at school needed to be dismantled, so we set out to help the 10% club. One lunchtime, things reached a boiling point. Isabella and her clan purposely bumped into a scholarship student, causing him to spill his tray all over his uniform. The cafeteria went silent, save for the cruel laughter of Isabella's group as they pointed at him. My blood boiled. I wasn't going to stand for it. I rushed over, grabbed the sticky, saucy leftovers from the boys' tray, and without a second thought, I slammed it right into Minjin's face. I gave Minjin a sharp look, signaling him to pass it on. He immediately understood my intention. A smirk played on his lips as he grabbed a handful of noodles and smeared it all over Isabella's perfectly styled hair. That was the spark. The entire canteen erupted into one big messy food fight. Sauces flew, drinks splashed, and for once the rich kids didn't look so pristine. Another time, the school was preparing for a cultural fair. A boy named Louis from the scholarship group had this brilliant idea to open a food stall serving traditional dishes from different countries. Everyone thought it was great. Well, everyone except Isabella and her snooty besties. Louis, who is one of Isabella's arrogant friends, immediately sneered at the idea. He looked down at the scholarship student with pure contempt and mocked him. He called him a peasant. He made a nasty comment, implying that the boy was probably just too used to working as a waiter serving others, so of course, he'd suggest a food stall. The cruelty of it made my stomach turn. That snide comment gave me an idea. I winked at Minjun, and we stayed behind after everyone had left. We secretly wrote Isabella, Louis, and their entire clique's names on the official list of participants for the food stall and submitted it to the teacher. The look on their faces on the day of the fair was priceless. Since their names were on the list, they had no choice but to put on aprons and serve food at the super crowded stall. If they refused, they would fail the assignment. The funniest part was watching them get a taste of their own medicine. The scholarship students made the most of it, ordering Louis and Isabella around relentlessly. They complained that the ratatouille was too bland and demanded more salt, or that the milk tea was too sweet, and ordered them to start a new batch with less sugar. I have to admit, I was thoroughly enjoying watching the mean kids squirm, but the smugness on my face was caught off guard. Afterward, Isabella cornered me in the hallway. Her voice was low and dripping with condescension as she told me that those peasant kids weren't at the same level as her and me. She threatened that I would put more care into who I chose to associate with. She even warned me that if I didn't, I could end up being treated exactly like they were. Whatever. I just rolled my eyes at her empty threat and walked away to rejoin my friends in the 10% group. Isabella and her minions shot dirty looks at my back, but I was carrying the Langston name and fortune. There was absolutely nothing they could do about it. Just like that, my high school years flew by. I made some amazing friends, and guess what? Minjin and I started dating. I couldn't stop smiling whenever I was around him. I loved my life in South Korea. I had even grown fond of Mr. Preston. Despite being a grumpy gut most of the time, he actually started to feel like family to me. Don't get me wrong, I missed my real family back home like crazy. My dad was getting better, and we FaceTimed regularly. Yet, as amazing as my life was, deep down I always felt a heavy knot in my stomach. I felt like I was living inside a dream. None of this luxury, none of this status truly belonged to me. I knew everything would vanish the moment I left this place. Eventually, the inevitable happened. My last week arrived. I was in the middle of studying for my final exam, the SATs, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. It read simply that they knew my secret. They threatened to expose me unless I dropped out of the test immediately. My heart stopped. Who could possibly know? Panic set in. I dialed the number immediately. A distorted voice, clearly masked by a voice changer app, answered. I was desperate and begged them to tell me why they were doing this to me. But the voice just coldly replied that I didn't need to know the reason. I just needed to do as I was told. Then the line went dead. Luckily for me, Preston isn't just an amazing lawyer, he's also a tech genius. I told him everything, and thanks to his skills, we tracked down the location of the phone. I bet you're just as curious as I was to find out who was behind it. We went to the location, and the moment of truth arrived. Preston didn't hesitate. He kicked the door open with a force that shook the frame. My jaw practically hit the floor when the door flew open. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, because standing there looking completely startled and terrified it just didn't make any sense to me why she would go to such lengths to ruin my life, considering we didn't have any bad blood between. I stood there trying to wrap my head around why she despised me so much. Susie looked at me with tears welling up in her eyes and pleaded for a chance to explain herself. She revealed that ever since I arrived at the school, she had lost her top ranking, which meant she had also lost the full scholarship to college that she desperately needed. She explained that her family could never afford the tuition on their own, so out of pure desperation, she decided to dig into my background. That's when she discovered that I wasn't the real Carla Langston, and that I was being paid to achieve these academic records for someone else. A massive wave of guilt washed over me as I listened to her story. I told her that while I understood her frustration, she didn't have to resort to threat. I pointed out that she didn't strike me as the kind of person who would do something so malicious, and I admitted that I was quite disappointed in her actions. Susie shook her head frantically, insisting that she wasn't naturally malicious. She completely backed herself into a corner. She begged me to understand that she was watching her entire future slip away. Meanwhile, some spoiled rich girl was going to breeze into college without doing a single day of hard work. I let out a heavy, defeated sigh because deep down I knew she was right. My anger faded, replaced entirely by I realized that this mess was actually my fault, and it wasn't fair for someone as brilliant and capable as Susie to have her future stolen just because of my deal. So I made a life-changing decision. I contacted the Langstons and convinced them to transfer the admission spot at GBA University, the one that was promised to me, over to Susie. I tried to comfort myself by thinking that with a brain like mine, I could easily get into a great school on my own anyway. The moment I finished my final test, I packed my bags and quietly slipped out of South Korea without saying goodbye to anyone, not even Minjin. It absolutely broke my heart, but I couldn't bear to face him while living a lie. Susie and I boarded the same flight back to the States. She couldn't help but thank me all the way there. And well, let's just say, by the time the plane landed, the animosity was gone and we actually became good friends. Things didn't all go as swimmingly as I intended. It turned out the real Carla was even more negligent than first thought. All she managed to get was a high school diploma with shockingly bad grades. These were now my bad grades on paper. My dream of attending a prestigious university was over. I let out a frustrated sigh, realizing I had to face reality and make do with enrolling in a community college instead. A year flew by, and there wasn't a single day that I didn't think about South Korea or Minjin. It was torture, but I couldn't reach out to him. I had promised the Langstons I'd cut all ties with my life there, and I intended to keep my word. The only exception to that rule was Susie. A week later, I was waiting for Susie outside her university campus, staring at the fancy gates and daydreaming about how this could have been my life if things had played out differently. Suddenly, I spotted a face in the crowd that made my breath catch in my throat. My heart started hammering against my rib. Was that Minjin? But my excitement died instantly. He wasn't alone. He was walking with a girl. I squinted, realizing with a jolt that it was Carla. It hit me like a physical punch to the gut. Wait, hang on. Did that mean his Facebook post was about her? Was the love of his life actually the real Carla? I couldn't handle seeing them together. The pain was too much to bear right then, so I forced back the tears that were threatening to spill. I took a deep, shaky breath and turned around, walking away as fast as my legs could carry me. But I didn't get far. Suddenly, I felt a hand grab my arm and pull me back. I spun around, and there he was, Minjin. He looked at me, and his eyes were shining with happiness. He exclaimed that it was really me, and that he had finally found me. He explained breathlessly that he had been searching for me ever since graduation, and his information had eventually led him right to this spot. Then Carla stepped up next to him. She smirked at me, not a mean smirk this time, but a playful one. She explained that she wasn't going to be the villain who stopped the course of true love. She had revealed my real name to Minjin and helped him track me down. She shrugged casually and added that since I was so smart, she just assumed I'd be attending this prestigious university too. But honestly, in that moment, grades and colleges didn't matter anymore. I turned to look at Minjin, and the rest of the world just faded away. My voice trembled as I apologized to him. I told him how sorry I was for leaving the way I did, and that I had wanted to tell him everything back then, but I just couldn't. He didn't need to hear the excuses. He just took my hand in his and gave me that adoring smile, the one I had missed like crazy. He told me that he had found me, and that was the only thing that mattered. We both stood there with tears welling up in our eyes. We completely ignored the students rushing past us, and for the first time in forever, I didn't feel like an imposter living someone else's life. I felt like I was exactly where I belonged.